All right. I'm taking the liberty. I don't know if I'm allowed to take this liberty or not, but I know that in Chabad they have the celebration of the yahrzeit of the Rav of the Baal Tanya, Yad Kislev. They always do the night after Yad Kislev. I once heard Torah about it, that in Kotton, that the Laila is Hailach Achar Hayom instead of Yom Hailach Achar Laila. So I'm allowing myself the liberty today. Chaf Aleph Adar. Now we were already holding Chaf Beis Adar, but today was Chaf Aleph Adar, and it's the Hilula of the Rebbe Melech of Lezhensk. Living in the neighborhoods that we live in, unless you're living in a cave, you have to be aware of it because all the travel agents have posters all over the neighborhood, ads in the papers, mass emails, Nasiel of Lezhensk coins, even Misnagdim like us. We may not know too many rabbis, but Lezhensk we heard of. The Rebbe Melech of Lezhensk we've heard of. So, very, very significant figure in the history of Chassidus for two primary reasons. The Rebbe Melech was the main mefitz. You talk about, in the L'havdol of Avdolos, the United States of America, the Deep South is the Bible Belt, and the Chveis Lexicon of Kentucky is the buckle of the Bible. Poland was the cradle, really, of the mass spread of Chassidus. Of course, it went to other lands. It was in White Russia and Belarus and Romania and Hungary and Czechoslovakia and Galicia, but Poland was like the cradle of Hasidic civilization. And the main mefitz, and I use that word advisedly, mefitz, because that was supposedly the famous haftacha to the Baal Shem Tov. He had an out-of-body experience. He met Mashiach, and he asked him, when are you coming? And his answer was, when your wellsprings will spread out far and wide. So there was a missionary zeal to early generations of Chassidus. Today, pretty much we only see it left in Chabad, but certainly in the early years there was an active movement to gain new adherents to the movement, an active drive. And one of the great mefitzim of Chassidus to Poland was the Rebbe Melech Lezhensk. He was basically the third generation. The Baal Shem Tov, the Mezritcher Magid, Rebbe Melech, and his brother Abzisha were Talmidim of the Mezritcher Magid. And among his great Talmidim were the Chais of Lublin, Reb Mendel Rimanover, the Koshetz Magid, the Marva Shemesh, just to name a few. So he was tremendously influential. He had a lot of Talmidim, he had a lot of Chassidim in his own right. And many of his Talmidim, when they became Chassidim, so they spread the movement far and wide throughout Poland. That's one thing that he's very significant for. Another thing that he's very significant for is that he basically invented the concept of the Rebbe, or as the historians like to call it, the doctrine of tzaddikism. Okay? If you look, sometimes there's a leitmotif. You go through certain svarim, and there's a theme that just keeps on getting hammered at again and again and again and again. You open up, talking, in contemporary Chassidus, you open up the svarim of the Satmar Rebbe, Zechron Levracha. So the dangers of Zionism, it's something that appears again and again and again and again. But a Rebbe Melech, every second shtickle, every third shtickle is about the tzaddik, the tchunas of the tzaddik. And again, we don't just mean a tzaddik in the traditional sense of someone who keeps everything in Shulchan Aruch, mamish according to the letter. We're talking about the tzaddik, what we associate with a Rebbe. A person whose every single kavanah is l'shem shemayim, and a person who can say to the rest of the Klal Yisrael, get on my back and I'll carry you, and a person who has tremendous kaiches in terms of tefillas and eskabel. These kind of ideas are crystallized in writing very much in the Sefer Naim Elimelech. The Baal Tanya, I don't know if he was quipping or if he meant it, as a straightforward praise, but he referred to the Sefer Naim Elimelech as Sifran Shel Tzadikim, which is interesting because the subtitle of Likutei Amarim, what we call Tanya because it's the first word of the Sefer, but the proper name of the Sefer is Likutei Amarim. It says on the bottom, Sefer HaBeinainim. So the Baal Tanya was writing for the Beinani, and this was Sifran Shel Tzadikim Gemurim, apparently. So it's a very significant Sefer in that regard. The Shiras and the Sishbaches that are spoken about this Sefer, you need a better haskama than that. The Baal Tanya called it the Sifran Shel Tzadikim. But if you ever look, I see nobody seems to bring Naim Elimelech with them. If you look at all the prints of Naim Elimelech from the Zlati Yova or whatever it's called, the first print, till contemporary prints, they're always asterisks. Every shtickle has asterisks. You look on the bottom for a footnote, there's no footnotes. There's just asterisks. Lots of stars, okay? So big tzaddikim said that wherever there is a star somewhere in the Sefer Naim Elimelech, right, that there's Chassidus Atayra, Chassidus Neflaim. He didn't write the footnotes. He didn't want you to know. But the Yodechein, the real Mukubal, and the people was kind of the Klein Isis, know the fine print, understand what he's alluding to every time he has one of those stars. Our contemporary, Kleisenberger Rabbi, Zechron Levracha, was done nifter about a decade or so ago. He said, he was so mafli in the Shvach of the Naim Elimelech. He said that the stars in heaven are a pirish on the stars that appear in the Sefer Naim Elimelech. And with all of those very, very high praise, talk about, the critics were raving, with all that high critical review for Naim Elimelech, Rav Nachum Breslover said that the mensch was 100 times bigger than the Sefer. People cannot begin to be massing the godless of Rabbi Elimelech from Lezhensk just from the Sefer. And the Sefer is so big, the Sefer itself has become a talisman. People use it as a school for refuahs. Women go into childbirth, they take a Sefer Naim Elimelech with them. It's an unbelievably revered Sefer. Beyond that, Rabbi Melech was Zeiche that, you can count them on your fingers, post Anshe Knesset HaGdayla. Our tefillas are from Dovid HaMelech and from Anshe Knesset HaGdayla. Post Anshe Knesset HaGdayla, how many figures in Jewish history were Zeiche that their chiburim should become part of the Siddur HaTfilah? The Rambam's Yud Gimel Ikrim is printed into Siddurim. It's set to Yigdal in poetry. Rav Shlomo Al-Kabitz has L'Chadaydi. The Rav has the Tfilah for Rosh Chodesh. Right? But in many, many Siddurim, if I'm not mistaken, even a lot of Nusach Ashkenaz Siddurim, the Tfilah Kaidem HaTfilah that's printed is from Rabbi Elimelech Lezhensk. There's another thing I was hoping people would bring tonight. You don't even have to own a Naim Elimelech. There's a lot of Nusach Schwartz Siddurim, although I don't think the standard art scroll. A lot of Nusach Schwartz Siddurim have another thing from Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk. It's printed in the front of every print that I'm aware of Naim Elimelech, called the Tzettel Kotton, the short list. Okay, 17 points, not so short. In a 10-point font, it still covers 2 sides of a page. But the Tzettel Kotton, the short list, 8 is an Avodas Hashem. Okay, so before I'm going to distribute, we're going to learn. We don't have enough time to learn all of it, but a few selected pieces of it are kedai to learn. If the Eilim wants to, maybe we'll learn in another week also. But I just want to say 2 things by way of Hakdama. And this harkens back to the introductory class we gave to the series that we called Chassidus from Misnagdim. Number 1, the canard, okay, that Chassidus is some kind of a watering down, dumbing down of Judaism to attract the masses. I'm not saying it wasn't about dealing with the spiritual needs of the masses. But if you read the Tzettel Kotton and you understand that this was not a manual just for Rebbes like me, Sifrin Shel Tzaddik and Gemur. If you understand that this is something that every chassid, that every yid, that he hopes will read the Tzettel Kotton, should implement into their lives, he's raising the bar so incredibly high that it's mind-boggling. It's the kind of thing like, a person doesn't know their own strength. We so underestimate ourselves. We so sell ourselves short and don't know what our kaichas are. On the one hand, some of the things we're going to be reading tonight are very intimidating. On the other hand, they should be very encouraging. Because again, these are not his little asterisks that you have to be from the Yodechein, the big Mukubalim to understand what he's talking about. This is something that he's writing as a directive for everybody. And basically saying everyone is capable of this. And he raises the bar so high that it's mind-boggling. I think the roots of Hiddur Mitzvah, Mila de Chassidus, Chumrah, if you like, that is so prevalent in Yiddishkeit today. I think you can trace maybe some of the historical roots, at least recently, in recent centuries, to Svarim from Hasidic masters like Rabbi Melech of Lezhensk and from a work like this from the Tzettel Kotton. That's number 1. Number 2, I took the liberty of printing on the back of this Tzettel Kotton, and these are going to be the ones that we're going to be concentrating on tonight, passages from the beginning of a sefer by the Vilna Gaon called Evan Shleima, where the parallels between the Gaon's advice for Avodas Hashem and the Rebbe Melech are striking, and very apropos, I think, for a class called Chassidus from Misnagdim. And again, what I'm trying to show is that in the famous Veter, I've quoted this once before, but it's worth repeating, of one of the other Gitta Yidden, when one of his Chassidim asked Rabbi, I'm so confused, there's so many different drachim in Avodas Hashem, and he said, Bariach sich, auf den Spitzberg trefft man sich. He says, calm down. When you get to the summit of the mountain, when you get to the mountaintop, everybody meets up. Everything that rises must converge. Ultimately, this one had his derech and avodah, this one had their derech and avodah. There are a lot of parallels, there's a lot of overlapping, and ultimately, everybody, whether you're chassid, whether you're misnagdim, everybody's striving for the same goals, I should say. Okay, enough of Akdama, let's pass it around here. Let's take the three over here, all right. I hope I have enough. Okay, I don't know, just pass them around. And I'm going out, by the way, all the underlines and all of the bolds are mine. So, don't pay too much attention to them. They're just things that I was inspired from preparing for this year. Okay. I want to start on the flip side, on item Tesvav, the 15th item of the 17-point program called Tzettel Kotton. The reason why I want to do this is because it's a segue to what we learned a few classes ago, the holiness of eating food that we learned in Sidur Shel Shabbos. You're going to say he takes it even a step further. Tesvav. Kaidim l'til sedayim la'achila, yom tfilas hashav shel Rabbeinu Yaina zel. Okay, Rabbeinu Yaina, if you look in most standard classic prints of Shai Tshuva, you'll see addendums at the end of the sefer, something called Yesod HaTshuva and Tfilas Hashav. Okay, Tfilas Hashav starts with the words Ana Hashem, whatever. It's a famous tefillah for Rabbeinu Yaina who wrote the sefer on doing tshuva. Okay, so basically what he's saying is that a person should be in a sin-free state before they eat. It's not just enough to wash until Sadayim before you eat. Yeah, you have to be about tshuva before you eat. You should be free of chet. Okay, you shouldn't be mafsik with this between the Til Sedayim and Hamaitzi, but after Hamaitzi say as follows. Okay, very famous and I should say controversial Chassidic formulation, famous Tshuva the Rabbi Yehuda. He was very much against the saying of L'Shem Yichud. Whatever, again, it's printed in all the Nusach Schwartz. We say L'Shem Yichud, before every mitzvah. He says you should say Azal L'Shem Yichud when you're eating a Suda and Achilus Rishus. He's talking about a Vachadik Suda here, not Shabbos Yantiv. And Ani Yeichel Hanaz Gufi Chas V'Shalom. I'm not eating for the Hana of it. Rakshi Gufi Bari V'Chazik L'Avadesi Yisbarach Shemai. I'm doing it with a kavana that my body should be strong and healthy to serve Hashem. Val Yaakov Shemchet Vav V'Hira V'Tainu Gashmi, no chet, no oven, no untoward thought, and no physical pleasure, which you're about to ensue. I mean, most people eat and experience some form of physical pleasure. If nothing else, even if the food tastes lousy, at least you're quieting down your hunger a little bit, you're slaking your thirst, right? Any hana gashmi should not be ma'akiv as a yichud kutshabrichu identitzaitis hakdusha shal achil v'ashtiyah. There's this yichud, whatever exactly yichud kutshabrichu shchinte means, but it's affected through the ha'alos nitzaitis. We read about that before, we learned about that before, I should say, in the Sidur Shel Shabbos. There are nitzaitis, there are sparks of holiness that are in this food, that I get, that I ingest, and that nourishes my neshama through the achil and the shtiyah. V'yechavin kishu eichel davar ma, aishayse davar ma. Anytime you eat something or you drink something, listen to this. Shahatam shehu margish befiv b'shas liisa v'shas gemiyah the taste sensation, the hana that you are getting, yeah? It's cool, it's sweet, it's tart, it's sour, it's juicy, it's meaty, whatever, it's garlicky, it's banana-y, it's pineapple-y, whatever the taste that you're experiencing is, you know what taste is? Taste is the nitzas hakdusha. Pleasure is holy. But maybe not so much. We'll see in a minute. Hipnimius hakdusha v'nitzas hakdusha asher b'ma'achal b'mashka. How? You hear what he's saying here? I would think, what do you mean? That's totally physical. I have taste buds, and you ask any 10th grade biology student, they'll show you the four zones on the tongue, the one that can taste salt, the one that can taste sour, the one that can taste bitter, the one that can taste sweet. And it's a biochemical reaction. It's not a biochemical reaction. You're experiencing kedusha. You're experiencing when you feel and derive pleasure from the taste of the food, you're feeling the neshama of the food. That's the neshama of the food coming out. And through my eating, and through my grinding it with my teeth, and whatever good stumcha is one of the stomachs, something in the digestive tract. Nevar pnimius ma'ameichel. I'm going to be like, Melachas Beira on Shabbos, taking eichel out of psilus. I'm going to extract the inner content of this food. Okay, again, this is a shtickle Kabbalistic thing. It's a little bit beyond my ken. But the idea is, this taste shouldn't go to the wrong recipients. This neshama, this kedusha of the food, shouldn't fall into the realm of the chitzayim. I'm extracting it through my taste buds, through my digestive tract, through all the good nutrients. I shouldn't say it's limited only to the hana of taste. The hana, the nutritive elements of the food. The things that taka give my body health and strength and so on. All of that should be going towards me to be channeled towards kedusha, not to fall to the chitzayim. V'oz nafshis nehenis me'apnimius. That's not eating like a behemoth. That's not eating like a guy. That's eating like a yid. And then taka, it's not just your digestive tract and not just your physical plant and your taste buds and your nose buds or whatever it is in the nose that allows you to smell the aroma of food. It's a rochnius nekafaganigan. It becomes something that taka nourishes your soul. V'apsilus nasa maisris. But in every food there is psilus. Yeah. If you remember the pasuk and the thing in Kisvei Arida, it's the Sidur Shel Shabbos we're working with. Ki lo lachem levada yichya adam ki akol maitzah pi Hashem yichya adam. But there is lachem. It's not lachem levada. There's a maitzah pi Hashem that lends form and substance, and we're learning that taste to the bread too. But there is the lachem levada as well. Anytime you're making a bayrer, there's an eichel and there's a psilus. So I want the eichel. I want the kedusha. I want the neshama of the food, for my neshama. What happens to the psilus? Psilus nasa maisris, the psilus of this food is extra, is extraneous. V'nitchel chitzayim. That taka is something that should be pushed aside to the chitzayim. V'yikavo az machshavtei. Shetekev u'miyad k'shiyag shesach l'nekavov lo yishas apsilus b'kirbay. L'tamech hazram. Now we know that there's a lav in the Torah, it's a lav shebechlos, a lav that is like an olive, but one of the things to fall under the rubric of the law of Loisa Shaksu, Balta Shaksu, is that when you need to avoid your bodily waste, you should take care of it. But still, there's a shear. We know, we all, as Bar Mitzvah, and we learned in the Hilchos Tefillin what it means to the shear to keep a goof naki, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be immediate. He's saying, there's Milad de Chassidus, a big madrega. If the first thing wasn't a big madrega, there's also a big madrega. Not only am I very careful about keeping the pnimius for the pnimium, I'm very careful about being matcha, the chitzonius and the maisris, to the chitzonim. That's the whole idea of a beer. A beer is a clarification. You can't have these admixtures. Something has to go one way and another thing has to go another way. The soil la Hashem, the soil la Zazel. So, when you feel the need to avoid your bodily waste, it's got to be immediately. That's the stuff that's going to the chitzonim. Because if you leave the psalms b'kirbay, l'tamech chas v'shalom es meichai, u'l'shaket es nafshay. That's something that could be metame your brain, your mind, and to make a davar sheket, an abomination out of your nefesh. L'shai says atzaya v'ashetan b'kirbay afilu rega achas. To keep the solid and the liquid waste in your body for even one moment. The gam, listen to this. Yitzayir lefana b'shas achilas ha'isius meichel. You should be mentally visualizing while you're eating mem aleph chaf lamed b'ksav ashuras, as it will be written in a Sefer Torah, that font, Sefer Torah font, ksav ashuras. V'yaharer. You ready for this? You want to know what kind of an avodah eating is? Eating on a weekday. Sha'oila tzadik alf. The gematria of the word Michael is 91. You know what else 91 equals to? Keminyan havaya b'shilu v'adnus. Yud ke vav ke is 26. Alf dal nun yud is 65. 26 and 65 is how much? 91 is Michael. So Michael, if you eat a Michael properly, eating a Michael is, you're being mishalev Yud ke vav ke with al dal nun yud. Now again, I'm not an expert in these things. I'm just taking an educated guess. I would hazard that has something to do with what we call yichud kutsh b'richu shchinte. The shiluv. You see it in Svarim, a lot of the Bnei Adot Mizrach Sidurim, the Svardish Sidurim, especially the ones written in Ksav Ashuras, either a big hay at the end with Aleph Dal Nun Yud written into the end of the hay, or of each letter. The Yud corresponds to an Aleph. The first hay corresponds to a Dalet. The Vav corresponds to a Nun. The last hay corresponds to a Yud. That's called Shiluv Havaya with Adnus. Okay. Incredibly demanding stuff over here. This is what every time I chew on a candy bar, let's say I'm healthy. I eat cantaloupe. This is what I have to be thinking. Doesn't mean only a Suda. He's talking about until Saddam. I think he means any time. He says in the middle of the piece, anytime you eat davar ma, you drink davar ma, this is what you're supposed to be thinking. It's a big avodah, eating. Number one. Number two, he seems to have, in this piece anyway, it would seem to me, seems to have a very positive attitude towards sensual pleasure, towards physical pleasure, at least in taivas achila. Yeah? When I'm tasting something, the taste is the neshama of the food. Unbelievable. I would think maybe the taste, that's the nisayan. I should be ignoring the taste. I should oversalt all my food. I should overcook all my food. Then I'm eating it l'shem shemayim. He doesn't say that. He says the taste is the neshama of the food. When you're being margish a pleasurable taste, you're feeling the nitzas hakdusha that's in the food. Okay, aware of that, look what he says a little bit earlier. Talk about being demanding. Okay, I hope we have enough time to do all of them. Let's start with Aleph. Onheb and for onheb. B'cholos v'rega shu ponim min ha'Torah u'befrat shu yeshiv batel levaya b'cheder yeshechal mitaz v'nechal yishain yeh maharer. Okay, I'm stopping and pausing here for a moment. Okay, we all know onheb mishabura, onheb shulchan aruch arachaim. There's 6 mitzvahs tmidius. There's 6 mitzvahs. There are art scroll books about it now. Can trace them about it. Yeah. You should be thinking about the existence of Hashem, the hashgacha of Hashem. 6 mitzvahs tmidius. Right? Listen to what he says, raising the bar, so to speak. What a yid should be thinking about when nothing else is going on. I'm not davening. I'm not learning mishnayos. I'm not sleeping yet. I'm not in a bathroom. I'm not in a place where it's also to be maharer and divrei kedusha. Listen to what he says. What a Jew is supposed to be thinking. You should be maharer not just in the existence of Hashem. B'mitzvahs asay zu shel v'nigdashti b'seich b'nai Yisrael. Kiddush Hashem. Now, what does Kiddush Hashem mean? If I didn't read weiter in the Tzettel Kotton, I'd say, okay, I have to think of ways to be honest and ethical in my business dealings. Be a good goodwill ambassador for Judaism, for Torah. No, he means ultimate. He means real Kiddush Hashem. He means Meitzah Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem. The Yidme benafshay, the Yitzayir b'machshavtei. He should use the Koyach HaDimyan in his Nefesh and the Koyach HaTzir in his mind. Kilu eish gadol v'nayra bayar l'fanav ad leva shemayim. There's a huge fire, a fire burning to the heart of heaven. V'hu, and he, this little Yidel, b'shvil kedushas Hashem Yisbarach, in order to be Mekal Shem Shemayim, Shover es Tivai, breaks his tava, his nature of self-preservation, and fear of heat, and fear of pain, and all the other things that come naturally to us, existential angst, what's going to be with me after I die. This is what we're supposed to be thinking about in our spare time. This is a watered down Judaism. There's a movement for nobodies. The grandeur of a Yid who can rise to the level of the Tzettel Kotton, of what he's demanding over here. This is what I'm thinking about in my spare time. Not if insanity is on, if insanity is over, if the market is up, if the market is down. This is what I'm thinking about in my spare time. Like Rabbi Akiva b'Shaita, Kol Yama Yayisim Mitzapa. When can I be Makayim, the mitzvah Kiddush Hashem? It's not for Rabbi Akiva, it's for you and me. Every one of us is supposed to be thinking about this in our spare time. Halavai shenitzka l'kach, yes.
Would the masses be exposed to this idea?
The Tzettel Kotton, to me, is pretty clear that he's writing it for everybody. A lot of the other items that he says in the Tzettel Kotton are clearly not limited to rabbis. And it was printed in every tefus of Naim Elimelech. And like I said, it's printed in most nusach Schwartz, although not in the Art Scroll. Yeah, I think the masses were exposed to this. I'm part of the masses. I'm exposed to it. And I happened to download this from a website, but I was exposed to it long before there was an internet. This machshavatay the Eibishter is mitzaref to a ma'aseh. V'nimtza in shena sheicha v'yoshev batel, rak makayim mitzvah seidah raisa. Comes out you being makayim mitzvah seidah raisa. Unbelievable. What mitzvah seidah being makayim? Not stam emunah in Hashem, not stam ahavas Hashem. The ultimate mitzvah, the greatest mitzvah, Kiddush Hashem. You weren't one of the Grushei Svarad. You weren't somebody who died in an auto de fe. You weren't somebody who had to commit suicide in Gzeres Tach V'Tat. But you're on their Madrega. If this is what you're thinking about in your spare time. This is what he's suggesting for us. Okay, again, talking about raising Chumrah or Hiddur Mitzvah, Milah Chassidus, to a baseline level. Let's do number Bays also. This is talking about in your spare time. New Krishma's got to be a little bit better than your spare time. Right? So what should a Yid have in mind when he's being Mekabel al Malch Shemaim? The Pasuk Risha Shal Kriya Shema Ubracha Rishayna Sheshbon Esrei Yahara Canal. You should be thinking about this fire and about being thrown into it Al Kiddush Hashem. V'oid Yechavin Im Ya'anu Oisei Kol Umas Ha'olam B'chol Inuyim Koshim. Forget about just the fire. Okay, the fire, it lasts 2 minutes. Smoke inhalation, I'm dead. It's very painful the first 2 minutes, but if you can mentally think about it, in 2 minutes it'll be over, maybe you can endure it. It's all relative. 2 minutes in a fire is probably like 200 years, of stubbing your big toe. There's only a priest there, even after what the Naim Elimelech says here. Listen to this. There's a famous Gemara that says, I forgot which Tana said, that if I had been living in the Dar Shmad, then I wouldn't have been a sign. I wouldn't have been able to take it. Why? I think he was talking during the Greek period. He said because they didn't put them to death quickly. They tortured them. The tortures, I would not have been able to endure the tortures. Listen to what he says over here. It's not enough to just be thinking about dying al Kiddush Hashem. You got to be thinking that if you be tortured, all the goyim, all the diabolic, sadistic, perverse goyim who can come up, you can study some of the devices of torture that humankind has come up with through the ages, and you can be sure that with modern technology, the even more exquisite kind of tortures that the Inquisitors or the Nazis never could have dreamed of are available today. Every kind of horrible, hard torture to endure. And like they did with Rabbi Akiva, they'd flay your skin from your flesh. To deny what you're about to profess right now. You're professing Achdus Hashem, the unity of God. Yizbok al Yisurim v'lo yodel. You'd endure everything. You would not give in to them and admit to a duality or a trinity or to whatever the guy are trying to get you to do. V'yitzar b'daitem achshav t'gilu eisen like canal. This is what his imagination should be taking him during the first pasuk of Kriya Shema and the first bracha of Shemona Esrei. Uvazeh yotzi yedei chiyuv Kriya Shema tefillah kedin. Is he writing an Igros Moshe over here? Is he passing this Allah? I don't know. I just know the words that are in front of me. He says, you want to be Yotze Kedin? This is the kavanah you should have. I don't know. My Shulchan Aruch, it says you should think about the Arba Kanfas Aretz. You should think about the Zion Rekiim. And he's a melech on all of that. And he's a melech on you too. You shouldn't think it's for the rest of the world. It's for you too. And that's how you Yotze Kedin. The kavanah you're supposed to have by Kriya Shema. He's saying this is how you Yotze Kedin. He doesn't call this a meal of the Chassidus. He doesn't call this a Haicha Madrega. This is how a Yid does Kriya Shema. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is meant for the rabbis, not for the Chassidim, for the tzaddikim, not for the benayim. But now listen to this. Gimel was the one I really want to get to. I want to do this quick because I also want to show the corollaries, the parallels between him and the Vilna Gaon. Gam b'shas achila v'zivug yechaven kanal. During achila, we learned that kavanah by achila should be that when you feel the taste, you're nourishing in the neshama, you're being malad in the tzedek. More than that, you should be thinking about Goyim torturing you and dying al kiddush Hashem. The zivug, that hana, you also supposed to have this kavanah. Yechaven kanal. Ukeshiyascha lahargish tanu gashmi, when you start to feel a physical pleasure, yitzayir b'machshavte kanal, you should imagine, like I just said, the takeoff of miyad yom v'fivu l'vavei. Okay, before I read on, 1 second. Okay, let's not talk about zivug for a second, because this is the first time he's discussing zivug. Michael, why do I have to be thinking about dying al kiddush Hashem through terrible inuyim and torture? Why can't I think like we read in Simon Tesvav over here? I'm thinking about being malad in the tzaitzis. I mean, you're supposed to, yesh mak b'rosh l'aniach shneitfon. You're supposed to have both kavanas at the same time. I'm not 100% sure, but it certainly doesn't sound like a hargasha of a tainu gashmi is something to be avoided. Before he said the tainu gashmi is the rukni. It's the ruknius of the Michael. What's so bad about a tainu gashmi? He's saying you need an antidote. You start to feel the tainu gashmi, there's danger here. So I think he's miyash of the kasha here. It's not a question of mutually exclusive kavanas. It's talk about the lesser of two evils sometimes, the greater of two goods. Avad, it's a good kavana to think about that when I'm margish taste, that's the neshama of the food. But there's a hechera kavana, there's something even higher than that. V'teikov miyad, excuse me, ukashiyazkel hargish taina gashmi, it's still the top line of Gimel. Yitzar b'machshavta kanal, v'teikov miyad yoyma b'fivu v'vada. He should say, not just mentally, he should speak it out. I'd rather die. The greatest tortures for Kiddush Hashem are a bigger pleasure to me than this, 20-ounce ribeye that I'm eating right now. Now here's where it gets confusing to me, and that's why I underlined it. Says every taina gashmi, has something to do with tsaras and the skin of the snake. Mishcha dechivya. And that translates as the hide of the snake. What happened to the neshama that was in the food? Why are you calling that tsaras and mishcha dechivya all of a sudden? I'm a little bit confused. But at any rate, as I sagte, v'kach yaimer, v'rai l'davar she'ezay l'taina v'tzim b'chasiyah v'tzaseshel l'dash b'ayfen anal. The person is talking to himself. I'll prove it to myself. If the guy will come over to him and say, sir, it's time for your auto da fe. He said, just a minute. People going to execution get their last supper, get their last meal. I'm enjoying my last meal. No, I'm ready to go right away. I'd rather go to be burnt at the stake than to eat the steak. From this time the Gashmi. Okay, finally he comes down to earth over here, and that's why I underlined the last line. It's important that a person when he's speaking, he's got to be speaking the truth in his heart as well. Yeah, it's an ideal, it's a goal. This is something we want to work our way up to, that we want to be holding by this madrega. When we learn Kriyashma, when we eat, and we're rising another tainugim gashmim, but it should be true in your heart too. It's got to be true. Don't say these words that I'd rather be taken out to die with terrible tortures, Al Kiddush Hashem, than eat this pomegranate steak if it's a bunch of baloney. You're not kidding yourself, you're not kidding the Eibush, you're not kidding anybody. Don't fool yourself. Okay, so obviously, even though this holy tzaddik, the Rebbe Melech Lezhensk, was flying in Eilam Esel Yonis, he didn't lose his touch totally with the common man. He understood that there's a big madrega, even for Baal Madrega, even B'Sifrin Shel Tzaddik and Gemurim, even for rabbis probably, and don't say it if you don't mean it. Yeah? A lot of people say before they eat on Shabbos, before they take a L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, the Kotzker Rebbe used to say L'Kavod Man Boch. Yeah? Get real, get honest. You're not doing a L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, you're doing a L'Kavod your stomach. You know? If it's not true, don't say it. Yeah. I mean, you could again. You got to know Chassidus history. It could be the whole Pshitsk and Kotsk was a counter-revolution against Lezhensk. Not so pashut. But at any rate, this is classic mainstream Chassidus over here. Okay, so again, I don't know where the Mishcha Dechivya comes in over here, but one kavan that when you eat, or other physical tanugim is you're being margish the nitzaitis hakdaishus. But a higher madrega is that this tainug does not compare to the gladness, the simcha that I would have if I'd be dying al Kiddush Hashem with the worst kind of tortures. I think in Svar HaKadoshim it says that people who taka die, not just plan to die, not just machshav tova mitzaref l'maisa. I remember reading or hearing once that in Svar HaKadoshim it says the people who die al Kiddush Hashem do not feel the pain that they're apparently experiencing. But I don't know. That's I can't source that, so I don't want to say it definitively. But what?
They said that about Rabbi Kiva and the Tzon Kachim.
What's the Tzon Kachim? A sefer, a pirish?
I've seen it in Gemaras
right.
where maybe like where Rashi is and something.
Yeah.
It's not in every.
And he says it dafka on Rabbi Kiva, or he says it by every kaddish who dies al Kiddush Hashem.
I heard it in connection with the story of the.
Okay, fine. So I'm not totally imagining things. You've heard something like this before. Okay, now take a look back again. There's too much to. If the Olam wants to learn this next week, I don't mind continuing, even though it's way after the yard side. But I want to show you the comparison between a gadol in Chassidus and a gadol in Misnagdim. Take a look at Ois Tezayin, the second to the last one.
How far apart were they chronologically?
Reb Melech Lezhensk was nifter in, I believe, 1787.
And the girl? They were contemporaries?
Might have been. I noted the girl was a contemporary of the Baal Tanya. Probably not too far apart.
So they would have heard of each other, presumably.
Good chance, but this sefer was not printed in his lifetime. It was printed posthumously. I believe the Evan Shleimer was printed in the lifetime of the girl. Anyway, look at this. Ois Tezayin. Ha'adam lo nivra ba'olam rak l'shaber es hateva. Okay? We know, some of us, at least those of us with yeshiva education, are probably much more familiar with the formulation of the Mesilas Yesharim. Ha'adam lo nivra l'saneg al Hashem. Those are the famous conclusion of the Ramchal in the preface to the Sefer Chayvus Ha'adam Be'elamai. Ha'adam lo nivra l'saneg al Hashem. Reb Melech says over here, Ha'adam lo nivra ba'olam rak l'shaber es hateva. Only to break his nature. Talk about breaking nature. Over here, thinking that I gladly die al Kiddush Hashem in my spare time, that I gladly endure every torture, more than the greatest physical tainug. I would say that's a pretty supernatural, anti-natural inclination and orientation. Okay, before we read weiter, I just want to show you the second article in Evan Shleimer from the Gra. Okay, first of all, the title of the parak is, see on the bottom of the page, it's a little bit different font. Evan Shleima, parak Aleph, Ba Yavur, Kol Darke Shvireis HaMidas, the breaking of Midas Eros, the bad Midas, B'derech Klal, Shu Sherish Paul Avayas Hashem Yisbarach. It shouldn't be Baal, it should be Kol. So my misprint, my mistake. Okay, look at Ice Bez, and that's why I have an asterisk. There's not one of the asterisks, not one of the stars that the stars in Shemaim are a commentary on. This is my own insertion. I meant it as a footnote. Look at the parallel in the Lashinus. He said, Adam Lanivra Ba'al Nakal Shabbos Atava, and the Gra says, Iker Chiyas Adam, Hu L'Ischazek Tamid Mishviras Amides, V'im Lav Lam Alechaim. If you're not going to break your midas, if you're not going to fight against your natural inclinations, what are you living for? Okay? 6 of one, half a dozen of another. To me, the two Gedalim are saying the exact same limud. The Iker Razan d'etre, the reason why we're here, we exist to fight our natural inclinations. One is coming from Tyrus Chassidus, and one is coming from Tyrus. Pardon me? They call him a chassid, right? Okay, so he was the original chassid from Misnagdim. Okay, let's read on a nice design. Let's get a little bit more specific. L'chein, Yizar zazat l'sakim midaisav, b'shnas yudches dafka, k'mosh avar. A person should always have tremendous reasons, alacrity to be misakin his midas. He doesn't call it shviras amidas, he calls it tikkun amidas. But tikkun amidas is shviras hateva. Yeah? Parenthetically, the father of the modern Muslim movement, Rabbi Salante, used to say, he had a pisgam, as is shver, it's a brach and ein midah, vitzalein and gan shas. I don't think he meant with the daf hayom. He said it's harder to break one midah than to learn all of shas. And if you do shas only with the level of Ian of a blot a day, we know it takes 7.5 years. And we know that we have much more than one bad midah. So it's quite an avodah, breaking one's midas, to be masaking one's midas. So he's saying you should do this by the time you're 18, or when you're 18, dafka, kamasha avar, kagay mishanel beteva, shalak shas. What does it mean to break a midah, or to fight against your teva? Let's say you're born a stubborn person. Yishaber estiva mem yom ritzufim. You should break your nature by, through 40 consecutive days, a stubborn person is usually an opinionated person. So whatever your opinions are, you think black, this thing is black, no, it's white. You should treat it as white. Right? You think that the proper thing to do is, some beispiel, okay? You think the proper thing to do is that breakfast should be the biggest meal of the day. You read as much in a nutrition book somewhere. And you're a morning person, you're very hungry in the morning, you're most productive in the morning, and you like to eat big breakfasts. Okay? For 40 days, skip breakfast. For 40 days, eat half a yogurt for breakfast. I mean, you're dead tzaddik after Maras Nafshe. Everyone knows what their akshanis is and what their akshanis is in. I'm just pulling an example out of the hat, but it could be anything. Saying anything that you're action, that you're convinced that this is the way it has to be, and you're uncompromising. It shouldn't be any way else. Do exactly 180 degrees the opposite for 40 days. That's his prescription. Somebody who's lazy, it's a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. For 40 consecutive days, condition yourself to do everything very, very quickly. Even if it's going to sleep. Don't go to sleep like a lazy guy, go to sleep with alacrity. Yeah, people can putter around. They're lazy. They're sleep deprived. Yeah, because they went to sleep 2 hours late at night. Why they go to sleep 2 hours late at night? It's atzlus. That was laziness. You see, what do you mean? The ultimate laziness is that you like to sleep. No, delaying your bedtime can also be a function of laziness. Whether it's going to sleep at night, you have to do that bezrizas. Getting yourself dressed, don't walk to shul, run to shul, take a vachakumai, ma'asefer, kayaytze ben. V'chein, mi shetivai baishan. There's a very important limit that he's saying over here. And that is that there are good midas and there are bad midas. And even that's not 100% true. The The word Mida is Mida, Mishkal, Evan, Shleima, right? But even Midas that we normally associate as being good, they're not always good. There can be Irzatz Midas. A person with low self-esteem is not an Anif. A person with egomania is not somebody with Imun Atzmi, with self-confidence, with good self-esteem. There's sometimes fine lines that divide between good Midas and Irzatz, knockoff bad Midas. מי שטבעי ביישן מהחלק של בושה ירגל עצמי מם יום לספל דווקא בכל רם וכוח תלוס איברב לקיים כל עצמי תמרנה. Sound Chassidus yet? If you're a Baishan, some Baishan is I'm a religious Jew, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm a fanatic, Khalil. If I show my Gottlieb, my love of God too much on my sleeve, Now again, you have to know what this is talking about too, because there is a concept of Atznei Alecha Simulakacha. You're not supposed to wear your religiosity on your sleeve. But if it's just a Baishanis, if it's just a shyness, let's say you're in a shul, you're in Stalin, you're in a Amunis Yisrael, everybody's screaming at the top of your lungs. You're bashful, you've never done it before. You think you have a croaking voice. You can't daven that way. Force yourself to daven that way. Don't be a Baishan that way. That's not a good Baishanis. That's Baishanis that's coming from an unhealthy place. It's your teva, but it's a teva ra. It needs to be broken. When you make birchas atayra, that should be loud. Until the help you gets you out the shemaya, that your bad meter disappears. Okay, it's after 10. I want to stop here. I leave it up to the Olam if they want to continue with this. I'm asking the Olam Atayva tonight. I cannot share the Cholent and Kugel with you, and Bernie is not here. Somebody volunteer to bring in the Cholent and Kugel. I have a chassan of a very dear friend that I have to attend. I'm running out. Yitz Hashem, we will meet next week. We'll think about the week afterwards.